Hello, everyone, and thank you for being part of this next in our series of Friendship Place webinars, in which we discuss topics pertaining to particular divisions, particular issues relevant to the work that we are doing. And today we are very fortunate to have with us students from George Washington University who are going to be talking on comparative evaluation of employment programs serving unhoused and housing insecure participants. They've done research around those we serve and have a lot to say and a lot to contribute. I'm going to toss to Jean-Michel to talk a little bit about what it is we are doing here today, and then Rachel will say a few words, and then we'll go to all of our friends from GW. Jean-Michel?
Yes, thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being online with us this afternoon. We are delighted to have the students from the Trachtenberg School presenting their study, and the partnership with the school goes back a few years now, and every year we have a very interesting study to look at. So this study is one of them. It's a great study. It's about, of course, AimHire. For people who don't know, AimHire is our job placement program where we use our own job first model. We assume employability, expedite soft skills training, and that put people in front of employers for interviews as quickly as we can. So it's a job now program. It's a rapid employment program. Um, I want to thank Rachel and Jean-Louis for supporting the students through the process. And I'm not going to go on too long. I'm going to throw to Rachel, who is going to talk a little bit about the study as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Michel. Yes, Rachel Yakubashvili, Director of Impact and Quality at Friendship Place. If I haven't met you yet, nice to e-meet you today. So yes, as Jean-Michel mentioned, we're now almost, I think, 4 or 5 years strong on this partnership with the Trachtenberg School, where we get a group of students who are in their final semester working on their capstone for graduation and looking to apply their academic learning with a tangible project with a field organization or agency. And we're lucky to have the students that we had this year. It's been a wonderful partnership and a wonderful group. I wanted to just frame this a little bit as to, now we're a few years into this partnership. Why was this the topic that we chose? So two reasons. Number one is we have this like internal feeling that our AimHire programs are amazing and incredible and doing amazing work. But how do we prove that, right? How do we measure that? And how do we compare to our peers? And number two, we know that with the HR one big beautiful bill, there are changes that have already happened or will be happening in the next calendar year towards requiring employment progress as part of receiving public benefits such as SNAP, TANF, and Medicaid. And so we want to understand what are things that we're doing well, where are our areas for improvement, where can we also be a thought leader in this industry to also train others to be able to meet the needs because we know that we can't do it alone. But we do know that we can be a leader. And so that was the onus of this project. The students will talk more about what the actual research questions were and what their findings and recommendations are. So I will turn it over to them in 1 second. The only other thing I want to say is that Richard McKee, the division director for AimHire, will also be part of the presentation to add a little bit more juice to the findings. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Richard and the students. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here today. My name is Kevin Days, and I'm a student at the Trachtenberg. I'm going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves one by one, and I'll start with Ari, who's first on my list.
Hi, I'm Ari. I'm a second year Master's of Public Administration student focusing on environmental and social policy. Thank you for being here. I'll pass it to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Davidian Reiner. I'm a second year Master of Public Administration student focusing on social policy and community engagement practices, and I will pass it to Tosha.
Good afternoon. I'm Tosha. I'm a second year Master of Public Policy student focusing on social policy. Thank you so much for being here, and I will pass it to Michaela.
Hi everyone, I'm Michaela. I'm a Master's of Public Administration student in my second year as well, and my focus is nonprofit management.
Thank you. We are pleased to present our capstone project, a comparative evaluation of employment programs serving unhoused and housing insecure participants. Our team partnered with Friendship Place to evaluate how employment assistance programs support individuals experiencing homelessness and how these programs may need to adapt in response to the changing political and funding environments. I'm going to take us through our roadmap. Today, we'll begin with an overview of Friendship Place and our project design. We will discuss the broader context surrounding homelessness and employment in the DMV region, followed by our methodology and data collection process. Next, we'll present our findings, recommendations before concluding with limitations and future considerations. Friendship Place is a leading home, housing, and homeless service provider in the DC region. Its mission is to empower people experiencing or at risk of homelessness to attain stable housing and rebuild their lives, while also developing models that can be replicated nationally. The broader mission made Friendship Place an especially strong partner in this project research. Our project examined how Friendship Place can strengthen and adapt its employment assistance programs in response to evolving federal priorities and funding expectations tied to homelessness services. To support this work, we conducted interviews with Friendship Place staff, reviewed administrative and programmatic data, and analyzed employment assistance programs across comparable organizations in the DC area. I'm going to turn this over to the next presenter to talk about the research questions.
Thanks, Kevin. So put very simply, obviously these are our research questions. I will just simplify them very quickly. The first one is, how are Friendship Place's employment programs different from other service providers? The second is, what works well for Friendship Place's employment programs? And third, how might Friendship Place improve its employment programs? So just a little simple overview, but these are the main questions that we looked at in our research. Next slide, please. Awesome. So you all are likely familiar with the background, so I'll cover this quickly, but we needed to conduct this background to get familiar with the context and the environment, specifically in DC, and in this situation. So obviously, with homelessness, job loss is a trigger, but something we were surprised to learn is that half of Americans who are experiencing homelessness are actually employed, but they earn wages too low to afford housing. So, of that half that are homeless and employed, they typically don't have jobs that are very stable, or they cannot retain employment for very long. And then, with that last point, those that are accessing employment services in DC are making about $16,000 annually, which is 4.5 times less than what is needed to live comfortably as a single adult in DC. Next slide, please. So zooming in more specifically to the situation of homelessness in the DMV, and a quick note on this, the following statistics are from the Metropolitan Washington Pit Count, which includes Southern Maryland and Northern Virginia. But as you are probably aware, we are facing a severe housing affordability crisis with housing shortages, rising rents, and stagnant wages that obviously affects people who are housing insecure. And in the most recent data that we have, 2025, about 10,000 individuals experience homelessness in the DMV. The following statistics, the 14% being unsheltered, 67% that are Black and experiencing homelessness, that's in the DMV area, but more specifically, 20% in DC were unsheltered and 82% were Black. And on account of higher cost of living and a greater percent of Black residents in DC, as well as obviously greater racial disparities and homelessness within the district. So just understanding that environment was important for our team as we prepared for our research. So with that in mind, we'll go to the next slide and talk a little bit more about the specific employment assistance programs that we focused on. So in our research, Friendship Place, we analyzed three of Friendship Place's employment assistance programs. So the first three are the ones that we focused on. The first one is Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program, which specifically focuses obviously on veterans. The second we focus on is the Family Fund program, which is focused on families experiencing housing insecurity or homelessness, and CORE, which is focused on individual adults. Friendship Place also has a Jobs First DC employment assistance program, but we did not focus on that program because we did not have enough data and there was a lack of available staff. So focused on those first three. And a little more background on them. So with the Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program, it has a different source of funding. So it's fully funded by the Department of Labor, which um, affects its flexibility in what it can do. So with those funding, there are requirements. So less flexibility with regards to how Friendship Place can direct that program. With Family Fund, it is fully focused on private funding, so there is a little more flexibility there. And then with CORE, it has private and public funding, so there's a little mixture of both. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Tosha.
Thank you, Michaela. So to answer our research questions about what makes Friendship Place's employment programs different from those offered by other providers, what works well for those programs, and how those programs might improve, we did a mixed methods comparative analysis focusing mostly on qualitative data collected by us. When looking at Friendship Place, we analyzed administrative and programmatic data that Friendship Place provided us on their AimHire programs. We also conducted interviews with staff in the AimHire division. To look at comparison organizations, we reached out to other organizations and tried to do as many interviews as possible. But because we had a relatively low response rate there, we also conducted online research using publicly available information on other organizations' program offerings. Next slide, please. I'm going to walk us through now what we saw in the data that we looked at. You can go ahead to the next slide. Looking at the administrative data on the AimHire division, we looked first at job placement rate within each of the three programs that we analyzed. We found that in the core employment program, the job placement rate progressively increased across 3 years of data, whereas for the Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program and the Family Fund Program, those two had significant decreases in their job placement rate this past year. We also looked at the number of employers that these programs engaged with, and we found that the Homeless Veterans Program engaged with significantly more employers last year compared to previous years, but the other two programs also increased the number of employers that they engaged with over the past 3 years. We also looked at the average earnings that each of the participants had at the time of job placement for each of these programs. And the Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program participants had a slightly higher average starting wages across the 3 years that we looked at. But in general, the average wage was pretty similar across all three programs. I'm now going to pass it off to AimHire Division Director Richard McKee to give a little bit more context on the programs and what's behind this data.
Thank you very much. Something I wanted to provide is the difference in enrollment time and funding, the cost of each program. You'll notice that while placement rates and average wages are fairly similar across the three programs. We have typically seen that CORE, the privately funded program, with the lowest amount of barriers with the to entry. It's available to any participant that we have capacity for, who is referred to us from a Friendship Place division. They have the lowest amount of like documentation required to enroll them. Really, we just need their contact information in that program. For Family Fund and HVRP, significantly more documentation is required. Veteran identification, personal identification, housing status letter proving homelessness, all of these other metrics required by the structure of the grant. HVRP includes a very strong emphasis on external training providers and connecting veterans to training providers, and comes with significant funds to allow for that. Um, that said, despite the increase in funds, that the cost of living, the time to placement, and several of the other metrics across the grants tends to be very similar. And that's important context to have in considering the performance of the grants. I will say that outside of the reporting period, we have seen some significant increases in time to placement and wages in the HVRP grant in particular. And it looks like Family Fund is trending that way as well. So we're seeing some more cost efficiency. But I think what the results of the study highlight is that a for a very reasonable cost for a program like CORE, if barriers to entry, to enrollment, and the focus on jobs and speed is really dialed down to, for what the program's goals are, the result is very strong performance in terms of time to placement and wages. We see that as we have evolved these programs since in the year and a half or so outside of the reporting period, that driving them to be more similar to core, that kind of core model that we developed 15 years ago for AimHire, has led to stronger results, stronger performance. And we're proud to see that the team is adjusting to that change in delivery, and that the grants are flexible enough to allow for that change in delivery. But I thought it was important to note that for like a very reasonable budget size, you can make a very big impact on a participant.
Thank you very much, Richard. And so I'll now dig in a little bit more to the what we found in the interviews with AimHire staff. This was really the bulk of the project and the bulk of the work that the project team did. We interviewed six members of AimHire staff. This is about 2/3 of the staff of the AimHire division. We interviewed at least one person from each program. Spoke with the director and assistant director, employment specialists from all three of the programs that we looked at, and also the job developer and outreach specialist for the Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program. There were a few common themes across the interviews. Most of the people that we talked to identified each individual participant's personal engagement and motivation to engage with the program and engage on their job search as the biggest factor in their own success. We consistently heard that participants who aren't waiting for their employment specialist to reach out to them, but are reaching out on their own, talking about jobs that they've identified that they want to apply to, that they're excited to apply to, are the participants who have the best outcomes across all the programs. We also consistently heard that relationship building between the employment specialists and the participants is what most helps participants sustain employment for long periods of time after job placement. Participants who, after they've been placed in a job, reach out to their employment specialist to check in regularly, to identify problems before or as they arise, instead of waiting until the problems become big enough that the participant may lose their employment and have to re-enroll in the program, are the ones who are most successful at retaining jobs after placement. We heard from a few of the AimHire staff members that mental health is a challenge that participants face that the AimHire programs are the least well equipped to support. Because the programs are very well designed to help participants with employment, and there's a lot of resources that they can be referred to for other challenges that they're facing. Mental health is a more tricky one. And we also heard, I think, from every single person that we spoke to, that the supportive workplace culture at Friendship Place makes the AimHire staff members feel very excited about their work, feel very energized. When we asked about differences between working at Friendship Place and other places that AimHire staff members have worked, we consistently heard that this supportive and encouraging workplace culture is a big part of what makes it feel special. We also heard that the when the AimHire division is looking to make improvements and changes to the programs, that they're consistently looking for what will help both participants and staff have a better experience, and that's a really important part of it. I'm now going to hand it off to my colleague Ari to talk about what we learned on researching comparative organizations.
Absolutely. And it really was a pleasure to do those interviews. That engagement was really critical. As far as our data on comparable organizations goes, we selected Sasha Bruce, Miriam's Kitchen, Community of Hope, and Pathways to Housing DC for the presence of employment counseling at minimum and service to participants from the DMV without a DC address. There's obvious variation in the populations that are served by each of these organizations and even within the programs offered by these organizations. We started with a survey, but as Tosha mentioned, with limited response, we turned to looking at how these organizations described their services online. And we found that that participant-centered approach is pretty ubiquitous among nonprofit service providers in DC. These organizations advertised regular outreach events, workshops. There was a consistent emphasis on integrated healthcare services. Which really gets at that many of these organizations offer that combination of healthcare and housing in contrast to Friendship Place's combination of employment assistance and housing. And across the board, there was an express need for funding and volunteers. We also had the opportunity to interview a representative from Sasha Bruce Youth Work. Sasha Bruce serves youth experiencing homelessness and offers workforce counselors to those who are already enrolled in one of their residential programs. And they see the most success in job placements for transitional and independent living programs where youth are more invested in vocational training, getting their GED, and part-time offerings that they access through Sasha Bruce's partnerships with these training providers and employers. One of the qualities that came up in the interview is that youth in these programs, in parallel to Friendship Place, generally have lower needs than longer-term housing programs they offer. And there is that motivation factor. For many youth in those specific tracks, employment or education is the immediate solution to housing insecurity. And despite robust partnerships, actually coordinating with stakeholders and resource providers in DC to make sure that youth can actually access and engage with the services they're referred to was a real challenge. Next, we're going to discuss findings in the order of our research questions. Next slide, please. First, how do the eligibility criteria and design of Friendship Place's AimHire programs differ from employment assistance offered by peer organizations? The most similar program offerings we could identify were at Pathways to Housing DC, which has employment counselors at their drop-in day center, but they have no public-facing, distinct employment placement program. So Friendship Place even having that is exceptional, which again speaks to that specific service combination that Friendship Place offers in this landscape. Next, we found that Friendship Place has pretty exceptional funding flexibility for their AimHire program staff. Cell phones, laptop, transit stipends are all provided as needed. This came up in interviews. And these are not explicitly advertised by other organizations that we looked at. Doesn't mean they're not there. We just may not have seen them. But given how tight funding can often be for these kinds of programs, the flexibility that Friendship Place awards its staff in directly eliminating these like extra barriers to employment is not only exceptional, but promotes participant success and skill sharing among Friendship Place's staff. However, as Richard mentioned, it also speaks to the wealth of private funding for Friendship Place's programs that many peer organizations may not be able to access. Next, we found that Friendship Place has strong connections with select employers who are already familiar with their programs. Participant-based expectations are really critical. Where other organizations center their partnerships with healthcare providers and drop-in counseling, Friendship Place offers those more direct connections to employers who are already up to speed and prepared to meet a participant's goals. And just kind of big picture here, as I've mentioned, this is a specific combination of employment services and housing that Friendship Place offers, and that is unique unto itself. Where providers do specialize in other services, but they offer maybe some job help, those offerings are not as robust, flexible, or as centered on quality employer connections. Next slide. And while we do not doubt that other organizations are equally as dedicated to their participants, we just had to pull this quote out from many of our interviews. They're always finding ways to say yes. That participant-centered approach is so crucial to what makes these programs succeed. And this kind of flexibility and autonomy is something that Friendship Place should be proud of and keep going, keep doing. I'll pass it over to Kevin for our next research question.
So in the next question, we were looking at the aspects of the design of Friendship Place AimHire program that contribute to the intended outlooks. And there were several aspects that we identified in our research that appear to contribute to successful outcomes for participants. These included, as we said, financial assistance, digital literacy support, and strong employee partnerships, particularly participant-centered job matching. Staff also emphasized the importance of mentorship, relationship building, and honest communications around expectations. Importantly, Friendship Place appears to be highly effective at identifying employers who are good long-term fits for participants, rather than simply maximizing placement numbers. I'm going to turn it back over.
All right, so lastly, what aspects of the eligibility criteria of Friendship Place's AimHire programs contribute to their intended outcomes? We found that the eligibility criteria do not have a consistent effect on program outcomes. We initially hypothesized that programs with less restrictive eligibility that eligibility would directly contribute to higher job placement. But over the data that we looked at, no program consistently did better or worse than others because of something about the eligibility criteria specifically. There are other factors that impact this. Richard touched on a few of those. And this trend may become more clear as more data is collected over time and future research is conducted. As we mentioned, the core program in fiscal year 25 did have an improved placement rate relative to other programs. And this may be due to its motivation factor, but also its funding. Core generally serves participants in deeper crisis for whom rapid job placement is the direct solution to housing insecurity. And this improvement placement rate exists despite having the least amount of grant funding because of those private funding streams. As we've touched on, the HVRP and the HVRP program specifically and federal grant funding comes with many conditions that may limit the metrics and how you define job placement, but also don't allow for that flexibility that more privately funded programs have. Next slide, please. And yeah, that motivation factor was really affirmed in our interviews. Just pulling out this quote, what we see leads to participant success the most is just momentum every week, engaging as best they can and applying. And all of these other elements of program design seem to be more critical in pushing that forward than eligibility criteria.
So I will jump in with our three main recommendations at the end of our study. The first is that Friendship Place should maintain the supportive workplace culture we heard across all our interviews, as well as ensuring that program changes alongside contextual changes continue to uplift both the participants and staff. When an organization uplifts its staff and emphasizes trust and employee expertise, employees feel even more motivated to contribute meaningfully and fuel intended outcomes. The second is data standardization for comparison across programs. So if Friendship Place wants to compare across programs, especially in a more quantitative heavy study in the future, making sure that data is standardized and evenly reported across programs could make the process easier down the line. And as we've mentioned, we understand that certain funding streams have certain reporting requirements, but just making sure some key metrics like program exits is uniform internally for your own purposes can help for future exploration and evaluation. Finally, if scaling up or new resources become available, one of the first initiatives we recommend funding would be more internal formalized connections to mental health and childcare support. We suggest following organizations like Pathways to Housing DC, who we recognize have mental health as core services because of the main population they serve, but have good models that Friendship Place could learn from. And just wanted to emphasize Friendship Place has very strong referral options, but maybe a dedicated internal mental health coordinator or child care provider coordinator could promote more personalized, streamlined, participant-centered care delivery in these critical areas. Next slide, please. So just to wrap up, we want to once again recognize that changes in public assistance requirements may change aspects of need within employment programs. This will require a specific type of work that has stability and meets some more stringent standards so that participants are not disqualified from benefits. For example, DC's upcoming change to an 1840 minimum wage could complicate meeting this moment, as it may leave people slightly above certain thresholds for assistance. So in these turbulent times, private unrestricted funding would fuel Friendship Place's ability to remain agile while responding to these challenges. Questions?
Thank you again for your time and your intention. We really do appreciate this opportunity to have worked with Friendship Place on this project and to learn from the staff and the programs. We're now open to questions.
Well, I'll jump in and say thank you all for a very robust presentation, and it's always fascinating. It's wonderful to hear from all of you because the degree of effort and the intentionality that goes into your studies are always very impressive. As I said at the start, certainly we can lead with some of our own questions, but it's a lot more robust if this comes in organic, if it comes from you. And I see Shelley, you have your hand up. So Shelley, I'll go to you first.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Chris. I actually don't have any questions. I only have a comment. Being a formerly homeless veteran myself, I just want to thank you all for taking an interest and being so passionate about this subject because it's extremely important. It impacts families, it impacts their livelihood and coming out of homelessness. So I just wanted to thank you all. Michaela Doty, I really wanted to give you a shout out. You hit some very strong points through your when you were speaking. Just really, really good, very impeccable. And just wanted to say thank you to all of you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or concerns?
Chris, it's Kathy Rogerson. I can't find the hand up button, but I thank you for taking my question. So I've been volunteering at a women's shelter in the Employment and Skills Organization since November, and I'm having trouble comparing the process. So if you give me a minute, I will describe what we do, and you tell me. And for me, the outcome is sort of okay. I mean, it's sort of okay. It's not fabulous. We work on we work on resumes, cover letters, interview skills, public speaking. We go to Indeed. We fill out job applications. If somebody gets a call back, we make sure they get there. They get the job. They don't get the job. Now, I've just said it. That's what we do. What is different about Friendship Place, and does it leave the people, and maybe Richard, this is for you, does it leave the people working there, and more importantly, the residents, happier than the look on my face right now?
I'm happy.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm happy to take this question. Thank you so much for asking it. A lot of those services are very similar to the services that Friendship Place provides in AimHire. We heard a lot about the importance of interview prep in particular, how to talk about difficult conversations in an interview. What makes Friendship Place's programs a little different is they offer their participants flexible funding to support needs that may impede their ability to actually go get to those interviews. So we heard a lot about funding for transportation through Metro card funding and gas card funding. This can be a big challenge for homeless or housing insecure people who may have a plan to get to a job interview based off of where they live at one moment, and then if they are living in a different place the next couple of weeks, it's suddenly much more difficult for them to actually reach that interview. So providing that flexible funding can help a lot. We also heard a lot about the importance of digital literacy. Friendship Place has the funding to provide participants with cell phones and sometimes access to laptops, but also takes the time to teach people who are not as familiar with this technology how to do those searches on Indeed, how to write a resume that will scan into those programs well and will be read by the computer system. And that we heard a lot about that from staff.
Okay. Okay. And so we don't appear to have any connections to companies. I mean, maybe a little bit, or other organizations, maybe a bit, but we're not referring. We're not known, I don't think. Maybe a little. That felt to me like a piece of it. What percent of the people who are placed in jobs are placed with people who Friendship Place knows,
Richard,
as
why don't you
opposed
take
to
that one?
Absolutely. So, for overall, the number of participants who are placed directly with a contact, that we have a warm relationship with, meaning that we know the hiring manager, they know they are a Friendship Place candidate, is only about 40%. Okay. So we do have various stages of connections with employers. Some employers are, who we call like partners. They are folks who are like Court Furniture and Compost Crew and Wegmans are folks who know the whole kit and caboodle what Friendship Place is. They donate to the organization. They, our partner was some kind of corporate way. Court donates furniture to participants. I mean, like we are like hand in hand. Some are partners who say, yeah, we'll come and we'll do a hiring event and we'll see how it goes with your participants. These are employer partners like Melwood Chimes, PCSI, Ace Parking. They are excited to meet pre-screened qualified candidates for their jobs, and they have some investment in the mission. And then we have partners who, to be blunt, the mission is less of an attraction as a source of free pre-screened candidates, right? And then there are employers who we regularly get job leads from, but we do not have a significant connection with the hiring manager. I mean, we may have tried a couple phone calls or whatever, but we continue to see the leads come through and we continue to have participants who are interested. And even if we never make a solid connection with the hiring manager, just knowing the kind of having the finger on the pulse of those jobs coming through and knowing that we are always going to have participants who qualify is good enough. And so, there is a combination of yes, for participants who really need to be in a positive, supportive work environment where we know that they will be, strongly valued and have some support systems in place while still being a competitive candidate is critical to placing those participants. But a lot of participants are ready to go. They just need their phone bill paid. They don't need
Exactly right.
what they need is kind of enough opportunities in their field to get out there. So, something about, Kathy, I'm glad we'll connect afterwards because otherwise I'm going to take up the rest of the hour. So, I just want to say from what you said, your foundation is absolutely there. A ton of what we do to get participants jobs is doing exactly what you were doing. While I do think funding helps quite a bit in removing the digital access barrier, aka the phone for the participant, there is a lot that you can do with just a volunteer team. And that being unknown is not a bad thing. Being new and, having the chance to come into a crowded job market, workforce development market with a fresh, candidate pool of folks they've never met before, as long as your participants are have that support you talked about to really come onto the scene ready to go, professional and motivated and to an employer's eyes, a competitive candidate, then that is a strength. Having that kind of despite Friendship Place has been operating in the sector, for decades, and we still meet employers who have no idea who we are, and we still meet organizations all the time that we've haven't been connected to. As small as DC is, there's always kind of new things to learn and discover. So,
Thank you for
um,
that answer, Richard. I really appreciate that. I wanted to keep an eye on some questions from the chat. First,
Also, we had someone. So we had
Yeah,
someone who had had their hand up and
yeah,
took it
yeah,
Catherine
down.
Catherine.
Loomis.
Catherine, I'm
Yes,
keeping
thank
track
you.
of that stack. Thank you.
Some of what I had in mind has been answered. Thank you for this great presentation. I am wondering what you would characterize as like the key barriers that are present in non-private funding. You've mentioned some. Wonder whether you could distill that for me again.
Yeah, so I'm happy to take that. First and foremost, programs that are funded by federal grants have specific reporting, training, and procedural requirements. Those are not always a barrier necessarily, but they do provide very strict parameters for how private organizations are meant to approach actually facilitating their programs. And so that may not perfectly align with an organization's mission or a lot of what we're seeing with these changing federal requirements is a shift away from a housing first approach. And even if that is your priority as a private organization, you may not have a choice in how you administer public funding when it comes with those requirements. Um, and then, yeah, a bit more to kind of contextualize that policy environment. We are seeing kind of a federal shift towards employment, it's towards framing employment as a treatment for homelessness. And while it's part of the picture, that is a dramatic shift away from the very successful housing first framework that we've seen for the last decade or so. And so as that public funding comes with that rhetorical shift, but also those reporting strings attached. It can be difficult for private organizations to align their mission with how they actually have to provide the programs and collect data on them.
Thanks, Ari. We have a question in the chat, you said?
There was one I saw from Jennifer Daly. What statistical tests did you use to compare the programs, and what software was used to analyze the data? And I believe Tosha did the bulk of that for us. Sorry to put you on the spot there if you don't want to answer that one.
Oh, I'm happy to read it. I've just been answering chat questions in the chat if people would prefer to read them there. But to answer that one briefly, we were looking at the program data to contextualize our interview findings within the context of how participants' outcomes actually looked. So we didn't look for a statistical relationship across or between the different programs, but we used R and Excel to create visualizations that we included some of in the presentation to help us understand how outcomes differed across the programs.
Thanks.
The next,
I'm sorry, there's also Garrett has raised his hand.
yes.
Great. Yeah, thanks, everyone. This was alluded to a little bit earlier when you talked about the minimum wage being raised up and clients being concerned about losing their benefits. My understanding is it's still the case where clients, if they're going into a new job, that they have a certain amount, like maybe up to 9 months, where they can maintain their benefits while still draw a salary.
Who wants to handle this one?
Yes, yes, that is correct. But like that is correct. And that's a part of the picture for sure. A lot of the placement monitoring that we saw at Friendship Place took place over longer than that 9-month period, during which people may have found employment that, again, with this higher minimum wage may in the future disqualify them from benefits. But then there's various challenges that come up. Someone may need to re-enter employment assistance, or alter their work situation. And so like there is a bit of that safety net there, but it's definitely not, it's just kind of a stopgap for like longer term public assistance stability.
No, yeah, understood. If I may just make a follow up real quick, I'm just curious. You mentioned kind of also alluded to where Friendship by AimHire may benefit. They want to scale up, benefit from mental health. I mean, one of the challenges I saw working with clients. I did case management for a few years, was the fear kind of based almost like paranoia of getting into the job market, not working, and then losing everything right away. So that's something you may want to consider as far as the education standpoint to reassure clients. Depending, obviously, things may change. I understand that, but that they will have that safety net while they're kind of gearing up and getting used to being employed again.
I also wanted to jump in really quickly on your first question, Garrett. One thing that I'm keeping a close eye on is yes, the HR 1 One Big Beautiful Bill came out at the federal level, but now it's up to states and obviously DC to figure out how they will actually implement all of these changes and what the parameters are going to be. And from what I understand, some of the quote unquote state level agencies in DC are still working out what their look back period is going to be. Are they going to shorten it to what the federal recommendation is, or are they going to go even stricter based on our constricted DC budget, as you know? So there's still a bit of figuring out to do about that 9-month period, and in some other cases, it's even shorter than that. I know Medicaid, they're thinking about going to a 30-day look back, which is even shorter. So
Thank you.
All right. Do we have to go back to can we go back to the chat and see if there are any other questions?
Yes, I have one from Michael. How does criminal or okay, Richard has responded to that, so I'm just going to read that exchange. How does criminal record history become a significant barrier for candidates in the program, and how do partnerships with employers help address that directly? Richard says, most important partnerships are with those second chance employers, or those who don't conduct strong background checks. And yeah, that reflects a lot of what we found in the interviews, that those long-standing like relationships, really understanding what employers need, what Friendship Place is able to provide is really critical, and that getting a strong understanding of the client's exact history and what kind of jobs it presents a barrier for is really important to ensure that those applications are strategic.
Great. I'm going to go to Ty, who has a hand up.
Thank you. I have an apology that I was not sure that I've been listening the entire time just because of other meetings, but I did want to ask how do engagements, if any, with government partners play into the Friendship Place model, and have in your research or with Friendship Place, have you considered the upcoming work requirements to continue to receive public benefits?
Upcoming. Can I answer that?
Sure, go for it.
All right. Well, we have a very strong partnership with the Department of Labor at the federal level, funding the HVRP grant. They have been fabulous partners. Shout out to my grant officer, Stephanie, and my NVTAC trainer, Sarah Chung. Both have been tremendously supportive as we execute a very logistically challenging grant to help homeless veterans get jobs. HVRP is an awesome program, and it should be everywhere. I think it is, but we're very proud to be one of the partners in the district that provides it. What we would love to see is a mirror of the combination of public and private funding that supports veterans. We want to extend that same level of a program developed specifically for homeless job seekers with public support, either city or federal. And that is something that our President Jean-Michel and our advocacy director Lynn Amano and myself have been talking to DC City Council about. So stay tuned. Hopefully, we will have good news to report on that. But we're firm believers in the model. We're firm believers that people experiencing homelessness need something that centers them and their needs. And so we're hoping to build on our private operations to with public support.
Thanks, Richard. So I want to go, Kathy has a question, but I want to go back to the chat just to make sure we're doing equal time. Is there another chat question?
Yes, there was a question if we intended to share this more widely so that others might benefit from our knowledge.
All right.
I can answer this one.
Sure.
Yes. We're still figuring out if it's going to go on the website or not, but one thing that we do actually have as part of our strategic plan is to get out there and have Richard and some of our other staff get out there and tell our story at like national conferences, regional conferences, and to share the model more broadly. So the answer to that is yes. We just don't know exactly how yet.
Thanks, Rachel. Kathy, you have your hand up.
Yes. I was wondering why you think you were unable to have conversations with the other organizations you reached out to.
I think it was primarily just a factor of timing. If we'd had longer time to establish relationships and weren't under such a tight timeline to get the information and write the report, I think we would have had more success in connecting with other folks. But I think it was just a function of time.
And I wanted to thank Bianca from Sasha Bruce, who was willing to speak with us and who's in this meeting today. Thank you so much.
All right. Any other questions in the chat? Any other questions from the assembled group? Hearing none, I'm going to turn this back over to Chris. And again, I want to thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share our findings. Again, everyone who worked on this project really enjoyed working with Friendship Place. And we had a lovely and wonderful experience. So thank you.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. I mean, and it really is very very inspiring to work with all of you and bringing that new energy, that new thoughts into the work that we do, and is greatly appreciated. This is so many. There are so many different things that go on, in the world in which we work, and to be able to expand it and get the word out about what we're doing and learn from others is, I think, so vital. Rachel and John Louis, are there closing comments you would like to make before I toss to John Michelle?
Rachel, go ahead. But as far as I'm concerned, I would like to say thank you to the group. As Rachel was saying, this is our fifth year, in partnership with GW. We are a learning organization. We are always eager to learn, and also, in fact, whenever the opportunity arises, to actually put in practice whatever we're not doing well. So we appreciate your recommendations, and we hope that this partnership will last for many, many years. So Rachel, if you have anything to add before we pass it on to the CEO.
Yeah. Just quickly looking back and looking forward. Looking back, I want to extend deep gratitude to this group for their care, attention, and dedication to this project. It speaks volumes based on this presentation. So thank you so much. We can't wait to use this and push it forward. Looking forward, as we've said a number of times, this is a continuing partnership that we have with the GW Trachtenberg School of Public Policy and Administration. And if you all have ideas of research questions that you'd love for us to suggest and have students help us out with, untangling, please reach out. I'll put my email in the chat. We often form our research questions and evaluation questions based on our experiences. But if you all, as our supporters, have ones, we would love them as well to suggest. So I'll leave it there and turn it over to Jean-Michel.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you to the students for this excellent presentation today. And Rachel, thank you for supporting the students during the process as you have in the past. I also want to thank you, Richard, for the proactive and results-oriented leadership you are providing at AimHire. The results are really there. And it's wonderful to know that you're at the helm now. Job First is a model that we've been promoting now for many years at the national and local level, engaging national partners like the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals, the Housing First Partners folks, the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans, National Alliance to End Homelessness. We promote this model because we do think that job placement is key as a solution to end people's homelessness. We're also advocating, as Richard mentioned, now at the local level, because we are in a period of budget crisis, and we feel that job first, job placement paired up with shared housing, another model of ours, will be solutions to help the district move forward. They are economical, they're person-centric, they don't need a lot of funding also, which is obviously key. So wanted you all to know that this is the work we're doing, and as constituents in the district, you can help us by having your voices heard at the DC Council with your council member in the different wards. I think that's really important. The three of us with Lynn have been testifying in front of the council to move this forward, and we're going to see what the results are. I want to thank you all for your support as usual. We appreciate everything you do for us, and you know we could never do this without you. Thank you and be well.
Have a good day, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to the GW team. Thank you. I'm going to stop recording in 3, 2, 1.